Hi team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prab, and today we're going to discuss about very interesting topic about the important protocols you should know when you're preparing for cybersecurity interview. My name is Prab and I have a 17 plus year of experience in the cybersecurity, which include the multiple vertical, and for more information you can check my LinkedIn profile. So if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. So without wasting a time, let's start with the first part. Thank you. So when we're talking about the protocol, the first important protocol you should know is TCP/IP. TCP/IP is a backbone of any computer network. It was introduced in 1969 and a lot of computers today we are using TCP/IP for the communication. Now when we say the protocol is a set of rules. Now if I'm speaking in English is a protocol. We are agreed that in which I will convey the things, because we have a people who join from a different countries who know their local language, but it is not possible for me to go by local language. So we use English as a protocol by which we agree between the two parties. Same thing happen here. We have a system A and we have a system B. We have agreed we will use the IP address. In the IP address, we use our network which belong to a same class and by which two systems can communicate with each other. So it's a set of rule. Until unless we don't give preferred DNS, we cannot able to translate name to IP. So these are the protocol rules we have by which we basically use. So as a cybersecurity expert, whether it is offensive security or whether it is defensive security, whether it's called SOC Analyst or Pentester, you should know protocol. And that is why the interviewer asks you a lot of questions around TCP/IP. So TCP/IP is from the foundation of internet communication, and it also gives you understanding about how the data flow is critical for network security. I will explain you in this way. When you're working on the SOC Analyst, you have to investigate the protocol working. You should know the TCP three-way handshake. You should know when to use UDP and how the UDP pattern is basically works. So until unless you don't know how this protocol works, you can't able to investigate. On the other side, when you're working for the offensive side, pen testing and all that, attackers using the same protocol to perform the buffer overflow, because attacks port protocols, port numbers are the parameter we are using by which we penetrating into the network. So that's why, it's very important for you to have a good understanding of the protocols. Now here you can see the TCP/IP is a fundamental communication protocol we have within the IP and commonly known as a TCP/IP, and it operates at the transport layer of the OSI model, because one of the interview question has been asked is TCP/IP or TCP works on which layer. So it works on the layer 4 of the OSI model, because protocols communicate through a port numbers and port addressing done in the transport layer of the OSI model. There is already dedicated video I made on OSI model, do check that. Now when you're talking about TCP/IP or TCP is a connection oriented. It offers the reliable connections. They also offer segmentation, and most important, they have a flow control. What is the meaning? When I say we have a system A and we have a system B, if they want to communicate, they first do the three-way handshake. They send the SYN packet, they send the SYNAC, yeah, my port is open, and then they send the acknowledgement. So this is called a three-way handshake. So before sending a data, they basically exchange the three-way handshake. That is called connection oriented. But in the UDP, before sending data, there's no acknowledgement. They just simply send the data. Without doing this three-way handshake. So that's why it's very important that we should know this TCP and UDP. Okay. Now why they ask? Because cybersecurity professionals need to understand how these protocols operate to identify and mitigate the potential vulnerabilities and everything. And that is the reason they ask this question. Now let's discuss what kind of a question they can ask. So the first is that they ask you about what is the difference in TCP and UDP. Definitely TCP having a three-way handshake, UDP does not have a three-way handshake. TCP is stable, UDP is faster. And how does TCP three-way handshake work? If the protocol is closed, in that case, what the TCP response will be there from the destination system. If the port is open, how can you bypass the ports? All those things can be asked here. Now, along with that, there will be one scenario question I'm taking is during an incident, you notice that malicious actor is attempting a TCP SYN flood attack. How would you identify this and what step would you take to mitigate this? Now, what is SYN flood attack? SYN flood attack is basically mean we have a system A and we have a system B. So attacker spoofed the random IP. This IP is 1.1.1 and B IP is 1.1.1.2. But he spoofed the random IP, which is called 1.1.3. And he sent the SYN packet to the B. If the port is up, he will send a SYNAC. But parallelly, what happened? B maintained the memory. B maintained the memory of the SYN packet, because he waiting for the acknowledgement what he received. If he doesn't get the acknowledgement after 70 seconds, he will delete that. But here what happened, parallelly, we're sending a multiple SYN request and the memory is filled with the fake SYN request. In other case, if any user really want to access the site, it become unavailable. So SYN filter attack is a very common attack which triggered the DDoS attack. So here one sample of question we discuss is, during an incident, you notice that malicious actor is attempting a TCP SYN filter attack. So how would you identify this and what step would you take to mitigate that? Option A, identify the excessive half open connection by network monitoring tool. Definitely that is a one countermeasure. Second, we are using is to mitigate by enabling the SYN cookies or rate limiting. And third most important part, use a firewall. So this is how we basically take the thing. So this is just an example I said how the TCP can be asked in the interview. Okay, so next interview question will be around, or the questions can be also asked around HTTPS, why we use HTTPS, what is the concern with HTTP. And those who are not aware about that, HTTP is a protocol used for transferring hypertext, which is a foundation for data communication on the World Wide Web. So, and it was developed by, Mr. Tim in 1989-1991, and it basically used to facilitate the exchange of file between the computers over the web. And the question can be asked in the interview is, HTTP works on which layer? So it's application layer. By default, if this is the user and he connecting to the website, so connection has been established and they're using HTTP. So there is a possibility any attacker can able to intercept the information, because information sent in the plain text. And that's the reason they ask the interview question around why we use HTTPS, what is the significance of HTTPS. So HTTPS use the TLS to secure the data. But here there's a catch is in some of the interview questions, they ask you question around what is the concept of SSL stripping. In other term, it is also called as a man in the middle attack, where the attacker downgrade the secure HTTPS connection to unsecure HTTP connection, and goal is to intercept and read the sensitive data like passwords and all that. So, as a candidate, you should know what is HTTPS, how HTTPS used, where we use that. So here the key concept they can ask you around the secure communication between client and server, how we do that, and use the TLS to encrypt the data. So as I said, HTTPS is an extension, and it used for multiple things, like it used for encryptions, because today when you're connecting to websites on SSL and all that, banking sites, it demand encryptions. HTTPS demand authentication. So you can see it provides the server identity through the digital certificates and preventing man-in-the-middle attacks. It works on the 443, and data is encrypted, which is making much harder for unauthorized parties to intercept the information. Now, why it is important, why they ask this question? So why they ask the question around HTTPS? Because as a security professional, you should ensure these protocols are configured correctly and use strong encryption to protect the sensitive data. And protocol like HTTPS, TLS, SSH or SFTP, they are vital for securing data in transit. So if you're giving an interview in the e-commerce sector, or if you're giving an interview in the banking sector, they definitely have these questions in their mind. So as a cybersecurity fresher or experience, you should know these concepts. Is it clear? Now, example of question they can ask you about the difference between the HTTP and HTTPS, and how does SSL TLS secure the secure communication. I will take you an example here. So there's a question is, you are investigating a report of SSL stripping on your network. What tools would you use to detect it, and how would you secure your HTTPS traffic? So first is we use Wireshark to look for the HTTP traffic where the HTTP is expected, enforce HTTP strict transport security, and deploy the modern TLS versions. And the third most important part is educate the user about HTTPS indicate in a web browser. So this is how you should respond. Okay, so this can be asked in the interview. The next protocol, which is very, very important to be asked in frequent jobs, is called DNS. Now, DNS is a fundamental component of internet, and it providing a hierarchical and distributed naming system that translate human readable domain name into the numerical IP address. Now, why they introduce this? So as a human, it is difficult for me to remember the number, right? As a human, it's difficult for us to remember the number. Even if I ask you, the phone number, what you have in your phone, it say with the name, right? So you don't dial the number, you dial the name. So you dial the name, and it will map from name to IP, and based on that, it locate the server, right? So when you type the name in your mobile, it translates into number, and by end of the day, what you dial is a number, right? The same thing what we have here in websites, or when you're trying to locate the remote server. So what we used to do is, as a user, so we have a user here, and this is the browser, and this is called as the DNS server, and this is my web server. Web server configure on IP called 1.1.10, and DNS configure on 1.1.1.9. So in the preferred DNS, I give 1.1.1.9. So user reach out to DNS, hey, I'm looking for facebook.com. DNS say, okay, looking facebook.com. The facebook.com is on 1.1.10. And this is how the user reach out to web server. If you're talking about 2024 and 2025, the companies are trying to protect the DNS servers, because DNS is the primary server to reroute the traffic. So, you can expect some questions, interview questions around DNS, especially DNS spoofing, DNS poisoning, and DNS tunneling. And the key concept, sometime when you're giving the fresher jobs and all, they will ask you around what is the difference between the recursive and authoritative. Okay, so let's say example, recursive resolver as your local guide. So example, you went to the society and say, where is my friend house? And this is you, okay? This is you. So this is basically my recursive, and this is my authoritative. So user reach out to recursive and ask that where is my friend house? If they don't know the answer, they will ask around the other DNS server to find the answer. And they handle all the things in a legitimate way. And they return back with the information, they provide the information. That is called recursive. Okay, that is called recursive. So your ISP usually provide recursive resolver. On the other side, authoritative is like your friend's family. So they are ultimate source of the truth. They know exactly where the house it is. So authoritative DNS server for google.com will give the recursive resolver the IP address called 142.250. So this is how it works. So recursive DNS server is a middleman which fetch the information by querying other server, and authoritative DNS server is a final authority who hold the accurate IP address for the requested domain. So you should know all these things in detail. Okay. Now next, why it's important for the interview is because knowing how the attacker exploit this protocol enable the cybersecurity professional to defend against the real world threats. Now I will give an example. Like if I'm a pen tester. Okay. If I'm a pen tester. So in the case of pen testing and all that, I'm using a DNS to exploit, to redirect the traffic on the other side. Let's say example, I'm looking for facebook.com, right? So it's going to DNS server. So now hackers trying to target the DNS server and chain the query that this is the facebook.com IP, it should be redirected to now this new IP. So by this way, we're rerouting a user to some other websites. So from pen testing point of view, we do this activity. So as a pen tester, I should know how DNS works. And from the defensive point of view, I should know where to block port number 53, how to monitor the DNS traffics. So attacker target this protocol because they widely use and have inherent vulnerabilities. And on the other side, the vulnerability to cache poisoning and tunneling attack. Now I will share you one perspective how they can ask the questions like, what is DNS spoofing and how it can be mitigated. So I'm sure those who have received such question, please share your suggestion in the comment box. Do you receive such kind of a question? And second question, which is nowadays very common, they ask is how does DNS over HTTPS improve the security, or what is DNSSEC? So we're taking one sample of question like a phishing site is redirecting a user to a fake domain using a DNS cache poisoning. How would you detect and mitigate this? Now what is DNS cache poisoning is, let's say example, this is you. And this is the DNS server we have. Here we have a cache. And this is my web server. So cache is 1.1.1.1 mapped to facebook.com. Okay. And 1.1.1.1 is a website. Now what hacker did, hacker basically manipulate this and say, no, facebook.com is on 2.1.1.1 and 2.1.1 is this website. So now user reach out to DNS say, hey, I'm looking for Facebook. So he say, it's on 2.1.1 and this is how it redirects 2.1.1. And here we host the phishing page, social message, economic message and all that. So definitely DNS poisoning, DNS cache poisoning is a very frequent question asked in the interview job. So how to answer? So detect unusual DNS query pattern, Mitigate by enabling DNSSEC. DNSSEC is basically mean they will only accept the new updates from the authorized DNS server by checking the DNS signatures or public keys, and use the endpoint detection tool to block the malicious domain. And this is how you need to answer. Now next is called as a ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. It is a protocol by which we translate IP to MAC. Now let me explain you with the example how the ARP use. So let's say example, we have a system A. This is my switch. This is my B system, and this is my router. Now router is configured with the IP called 1.1.1.1, B configured with 1.1.2, and A configured with 1.1.3. Now every system maintains the ARP table. Here we have a ARP table and it maintains the information about the neighbor IPs. So 1.1.1.1, and its MAC address is basically 8B H7, 9B H9. So 1.1.1, 8B H7, 1.1.1.2 is 9B H9. So when A, and for him the default gateway is 1.1.1.1. So if you go by the OSI model, the first layer is application presentation. I'm talking about from a source point. Definitely first is always physical, but I'm talking about from a source. Application presentation session transport. Network layer is 1.1.1. So they will check into the ARP table. 1.1 is mapped to which MAC address? 8B H7. So they attach 8B H7 to the frame. Then they send the request to switch. Switch will check 8B H7 on which particular port, and then on that particular port only we send the data to the router. So this is called as a unicasting. This is called as a unicasting. So ARP is a table which maintain the neighbor IP and MAC. So now B is the hacker. He used one tool called Kane Enable, and through that he poisoned the ARP table remotely and replaced this to the 9B H9. So now the request go by A to switch. Switch will send to the B, and by which we can able to intercept the information. So ARP table, ARP spoofing, ARP poisoning, these are some of the major primary attacks which is asked. So that's why as a ARP you should know from the interview perspective, because it is used in the offensive also, it is used in a defensive also. Now why it is important? Because employee want to gauge their understanding on how device communicate, and knowing the ARP help you to explain the mitigation strategy like dynamic ARP inspections and secure the switch configuration. And sometime when you're from SOC analyst perspective, you need to understand how the ARP table is vital for identifying issues like duplicate IPs and rogue devices in the network. Now, the question can be asked is what is ARP spoofing and how do you prevent it? If you're going for the SOC analyst positions or pen testing, definitely they will ask. On the other side, how does ARP works in the network communication is another important thing they will ask. So let's take example, your network experience ARP spoofing and user report a slow connection. What step would you take to identify resolve this? So answer is use a tool like ARPing or Wireshark to detect the duplicate IP MAC pairing. Implement the dynamic ARP inspections on the switches, and educate the user on secure Wi-Fi usage or wired usage to avoid the rogue access point. So this is how we basically take this practice or enable the port security. So when you're preparing for cybersecurity jobs and all that, make sure you should have a very good understanding about the ARP. Now next important interview is topic is SSH. SSH, what is SSH? Secure shell. There's a brief history behind that. So initially what happened, we used to have a DOS based system. So we have a DOS based system A and we have a DOS based system B. If I want to execute a command on the remote system, we used to use a telnet. So we use a telnet, and by which we can able to execute the command on the remote system. But the problem is that anyone can able to intercept this information. Is it clear? Anyone can able to intercept this information. That is possible. So now what SSH is doing is SSH basically address this issue. Now they're creating a secure tunnel, secure connection by which we can able to send the remote command. So that is why when you're configuring the firewalls, when you're configuring servers, we use SSH. SSH provides a secure remote login and command, but often is if SSH port number is open 22, then anyone can do the brute force attack on the 22. So why it is important? Because SSH provide the secure remote access for protecting against the credential theft. So some questions like, what are the common SSH vulnerabilities? How do you secure it? Because today for any remote administration, remote command executions, we use SSH. So definitely as a SOC analyst or as a pen tester, they will ask you the questions around this area. And how does SSH key-based authentication work? Very, very important. Okay, when you're going for network security jobs or when you're going for the SOC analyst job, they definitely ask the question around this area. So the scenario is you notice multiple failed login attempts on an SSH server. How would you investigate and secure the server? So answer is investigate the logs such as var log, auth log on Linux for brute force attempts. Secure the server by disabling the password authentication using a key-based authentication and implement the rate limiting with the tools like fail to bane or something else. It is just an example I give which reflect your experience and all that. Now next topic we have is FTP, file transfer protocol. See, it is like a family of HTTP, you can say. When you browsing a page by browser, but in the same time by browser you want to locate and remotely access the file server. So with the help of FTP you can do that. But as a user you should know what is the difference in FTP, SFTP. Okay, SFTP or FTPS, and risk of using an unsecure FTP, because today FTP we are using for uploading a sensitive data. So as an interviewer, we are expecting you to know what is FTP, how it works. The protocol like HTTP, TLS, SSH, SFTP are vital for securing data in transit. So FTP ensures secure file transfer, avoid the risk of plain FTP. Okay. So I will ask you how the question can be asked. Like example, what is the difference in FTP, SFTP or SFTP versus FTPS? The difference is that SFTP is like a secure file transfer protocol. Sorry, SFTP is SSH over FTP. First we set up the SSH and then we set up the FTP connection. On the other side, FTPS means FTP over SSL. And second is how do you secure the file transfer over the network? Very basic question. So let's say example, the pen test reveal your organization still using FTP instead of SFTP. What is the risk does this pose and how would you transition to SFTP? The answer is, first we explain the risk, like unencrypted data transmissions we have, and transition to SFTP by deploying the OpenSSH or managed file transfer solution. It is very important for you to know how OpenSSH works if you're applying for a SOC analyst jobs and all that, and update the rules and access control to block the FTP traffic. Now the next important thing is called as a SMB. Very, very important. Very important. Server message block. Very important. See, when you're talking about SMB, okay, now why it is important? Because in the past we have seen a lot of attacks on SMB. Okay, so SMB is used for file sharing. If two systems enable with SMB server message block port numbers and services, so by this particular protocol we exchanging data, we sharing the files, and if the SMB is blocked, everything is blocked. So one thing you need to understand, you can't able to share the files and everything. So it's very important you should know SMB. Now we have some vulnerabilities like, everyone know WannaCry and all that. In the WannaCry, the base of attack is SMB only. So vulnerability is vulnerable to exploit like eternal blue and everything, which is a primary concern. So if you want to understand the real life analogy of SMB is like a library system. So library is a server and share books is a file with the members. Members is your client. So system is poorly managed, unauthorized people can sneak and borrow books without the permission. So by securing the SMB, you ensure only valid members can able to access. So how to secure the SMB? Like, you can disable SMB version 1, use SMB version 2, version 3, which include the encryptions, regularly update your systems, limit the SMB access to your trusted IP address, block the unnecessary port like 445 and 139 for the external services, and use SMB version 3 encryption to protect the data in transit. So that's something we can use. Okay. So yeah. So why it is important? Because SMB or other encryption impact the compliance, because sometimes it's a compliance requirement. It's a standard requirement that you need to have a secure configuration, and having SMB 1 and 2 is basically bring the compliance issues, because now it's mandatory from the standards also you need to maintain this version of SMB. So disabling the insecure protocol like SMB version 1 and FTP or attacker target these protocols because they are widely used in having inherent vulnerabilities like SMB and all that. That's the reason they will ask you question around this area. So if you see the question perspective, why should SMB version 1 should be disabled? and what are the common SMB vulnerability. So scenario is attacker use exploit like Eternal Blue to compromise the SMB one on your network, and what step would you take to secure the SMB? So answer is immediately disable SMB version 1 on all the devices, patch systems to fix the Eternal Blue vulnerability, and use a host based detection to monitor the SMB traffic. So that's how you can basically answer. Okay, so next is called as the TLS and SSL. I know, it's like a backbone of today internet. It is encrypting data in transit. HTTPS is one of the common protocol, or HTTP using a TLS SSL as a protocol for sending a data. But is it limited to only HTTPS? So today, if we take example SMTPS, POP3 or FTPS, everyone is using TLS now. And as you expect that, okay, anything which is used regularly can be asked in the exam, also can be asked in the interviews, right? So the key concepts here, you should know how the TLS handshake works. So very, very frequent question asked in any interview job is, what is the difference between the SSL and TLS? So you should know the difference in TLS 1.2, 1.3, because it is very important for you to know that. And I already shared a dedicated banner pass on the LinkedIn, so you can check the difference in TLS 1.2, TLS 1.3. TLS 1.3 is basically better in terms of they don't do multiple time handshakes. One time handshake they do, that is faster, but well compatible with the mobiles. They use the ACC advanced algorithm for the key management. So they have a multiple features. And why it is important for the interviews, like protocol like HTTPS, TLS, SSH and SFTP are vital for securing data in transit. Okay. And enforcing 1.2, 1.3 is now a requirement of PCI DSS. So HTTPS and TLS encrypt web traffic to prevent the eavesdropping and MITM attack. That's something you should know. So question can be asked is, how does TLS handshake works? My humble request is enable the Wireshark and then collect and do the HTTPS traffic. Understand the entire TLS process, because until unless you don't know practical, it is difficult for you to answer that question in the interview. Because if you go for SOC analyst job and all, that's a very common question they ask is how google.com works, how TLS works in google.com, how TLS exchange the handshake process. And very frequent question is, what is the difference between the TLS and SSL? So scenario here is vulnerability scan show that your web server till support TLS 1.0. Why is this a concern? How would you address that? So answer is TLS 1.0 is vulnerable to attacks like PODL and does not meet the modern compliance standard, and disabling the TLS 1.0, 1.1, enforce 1.2 and 3 is the recommendation. Update the server configuration to use a strong safer suit. So this is a very frequent thing which can be asked. Another interview topic which asked in the exam or asked in the jobs are VPN. Now why it is important, because VPN is a secure remote access communication protocol. Today, if you're talking about remote user want to connect with any branches and all that, we use VPN because it providing you the secure tunnel by which you send the data. So key concept they can ask is, what is the difference between the site-to-site VPN and user provide VPN? Why we use SSL VPN, extranet VPN? So they will definitely ask the question around this area. And the reason is why they ask this question is because these protocols are ubiquitous, making them high value target for attackers. And it is also critical for securing a remote workforce. The things which has happened after the COVID, people are working remotely. So you can expect some questions around this area. So example is, what is the difference in IPsec and OpenVPN? Why is WireGuard gaining popularity over traditional VPN? So that kind of a question they ask. So we're taking one scenario here is, your organization use IPsec VPN, but employee complain about the slow performance. How would you address this? So answer is, analyze the network traffic for bottleneck, optimize the VPN configuration like MTU settings, or consider the WireGuard for improving the performance. And the third most important part is ensure encryption settings, balance security and speed. So it's all about your experience, reflect how you respond. Okay. Another important topic which is asked in the interview is ICMP. You know, when you ping any system and all that, the protocol that work is ICMP. And when you're giving a job for SOC L1 or pen testing, ICMP is a very common protocol they ask. ICMP is a protocol which is used to provide, which is used for diagnosing the network connections. And they will ask you, if you ping, what is happened. So they say ICMP echo request. And whatever the reply we got an ICMP reply. So one of the common attack which is they ask in the interview is called as Smurf and ping of death. Now what is Smurf and ping of death? I will just give you high level. So first is called a Smurf attack. So we have a system A and we have a system B. Here we have 1000 IP. So A spoof the B IP and send the ICMP echo request to these 1000 IPs. These 1000 IP reply back to the B. So entire overflow coming on the B. So that is called ICMP request and reply. So ping, this is called as example of Smurf attack. But ping of death basically means you're sending a ping packet which is larger than the current ping capacity packet. So that is basically called as a ping of death attack. Now, why this topic is very important, especially for SOC L1 people, because protocol like SNMP and ICMP play a critical role in network monitoring. It helps you to facilitate the monitoring and incident response, and it is used for diagnostic, but can be used to abuse in attacks like Smurf and ping of death attack. Let me give you an example. So question is, what is ICMP? Why might you block it? Okay, so that kind of questions are there, and your network is experiencing a high traffic due to Smurf attack. How would you mitigate that? So answer is identify source of amplification from where it is coming, mitigate the dissembling ICMP broadcast response on the router so it will not consider any request, and use a firewalls to block the unnecessary ICMP traffic. So we also need to know other protocols like an SMTP, IMAP, POP3, which is the email protocols. We have an NTP protocol for the time synchronizations, which is also vulnerable to DDoS attacks, and BGP, which is the backbone of the internet, a routing protocol to the BGP hijacking. So as a cybersecurity candidate, whether you are preparing for the SOC interviews or pen testing or even for the compliance auditing, these protocols are mandatory for you to review. This is all from my side. Do let me know in the comment box. Shall I continue the series of cybersecurity in 2025 and bring more coffees on table to upscale your knowledge on this area? Please note, without you, I'm nothing. I'm spending my 18 hours of my research work only for my YouTube channel, just to bring a free awareness without any cost. If you think it's worth it, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. Good day. Bye.